sticks, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University. And today, I'm joined by Jay Carson, an Ohio area attorney and sometimes defender of freedom. Welcome to The Politics Guys, Jay.
Hey, good to be here with you, Trey.
Yeah, we don't oftentimes, I guess just a couple of times it's been the two of us on the show. So I'm kind of excited to do this. Everybody else, I mean, maybe they don't want us to lead the conservatives, right? They're just a little concerned. We'll take the show over. But anyway, yeah,
but everyone else is on vacation, so it's only the conservatives who are still working here. So
yeah, I mean, that's true, right? When everybody else is gone, the Marxists are, who knows? But, this week we actually kind of get to deal with something. I'm kind of fun that I think that we'll get to do it with just us, because the first story we're going to be taking on is we're going to be talking about the Hunter Biden plea deal. We're going to talk about ProPublica's investigation into Alito. We'll talk a little bit about the immigration debate that just came out this Friday. And then we will be finishing up the show talking about Boebert's delayed impeachment vote. And then finally with the potential Florida Chinese immigration ban over owning property. So that's what we're getting to on the show today. But Jay, what I thought we'd start with is the Hunter Biden plea deal. Now, obviously, it's a big deal by itself, but it comes up in this broader context of what's going on with the DOJ. So let me just run through a little bit of this. Out this week are the details on President Biden's son, Hunter Biden's plea deal. Now, the deal has him pleading, as we now understand, guilty to 2 misdemeanors for tax offenses. Those specifically are failures to pay his taxes on time, but they avoid charges on a gun charge and potentially felonies related to tax crimes. Now, the deal keeps him out of any jail time. The tax issue is that he failed to pay more than $100,000 on approximately $1.5 million in income over 2 years in 2017 and 2018. Now, he has now paid back those back taxes, but of course, they were late. That's what he's pleading to. Now, what he's not having to have a charge on is the gun charge, which is that he was in possession for approximately 2 weeks of a Colt Cobra 38 special, despite knowing that he was a drug user. Now, Hunter Biden has had a string of substance abuse in the wake of the death of his brother, which he self-admits to as addiction. Now, we have all of this coming up. It's not particularly positive news for Biden, although I'm sure the Biden administration would like this to kind of be done. But this week, CNN, not exactly a right-wing publication, has revealed information about an IRS whistleblower who has effectively argued that this deal is a lot better for Hunter Biden, than it should be. Instead of the misdemeanors, he should have had charges for tax evasion and filing false tax returns. Now, those, of course, would be felonies, not misdemeanor charges. Now, the larger 11-count charge had the backing of some prosecutors, according to the whistleblower, but not more senior attorneys. Now, these claims come from Gary Shapley, a 14-year IRS veteran who oversaw parts of this particular case. Now, Shapley has come to Congress earlier this year and talked to the House Ways and Means Committee. Now that David West, who is in charge of this, wanted broader charges, but was not able to get them from Merrick Garland, which is interesting because Garland was telling Congress potentially not the full truth, if that's the case, when he said that West had the full authority to make the charging decisions. So effectively what Shapley is saying here is there's some political interference in the case. Now, it's worth noting, of course, that David West is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who is still around, and West has, since the whistleblower stuff coming public, pointed to a June 7 letter arguing that his decisions were made independently. Now, of course, for listeners, You got to realize plea deals are not uncommon. As a matter of fact, they are almost always what you're getting in the criminal justice system. We can talk about that more later. But Jay, so what's your take on the Hunter Biden plea deal? And what do you think it's straightforward and fair, or do you think that there is something to the whistleblower?
Oh, I think we need to hear more from the whistleblower before we can make that determination, right? I mean, there are claims of actual text messages and saying I'm here with my father and essentially send the money now. To me, I mean the issue over Hunter Biden has never been Hunter Biden. It's always been the issue that the media has been relentlessly uncurious about is who is the big guy and why is he getting 10%? And this doesn't really shed any light on that. In fact, it sort of closes out that piece. I think there's a say, okay, Hunter Biden didn't pay taxes on income he received, right? And he should plead to that. Fair enough. But the bigger question is, where did he receive that income from, and for what services did he provide in exchange for that income? Those are the bigger questions that this doesn't really answer. And I think those are the questions that people are at least, conservatives, at least I'm more concerned about. I don't particularly care, but the gun thing and if he's late on filing his taxes, fine. And there's also just there's just a lot of unanswered questions regarding where, one, if Hunter's paid off all these taxes now, again, there's the question of where did this money come from? I think it's something that needs to be looked into. I mean, I'm not going to comment on the, what all the whistleblower said, but at this point, we've got an actual witness with an actual name who says he has actual documents. So, that'll either play out or it won't. We'll find out, in the coming weeks.
So let's assume, which I think is a potentially likely scenario, that Hunter Biden is effectively using his last name to be able to make, money on these kinds of things. I can imagine that that's kind of where you're going to be at. I've also noticed there's been kind of a change in tone from the White House about Hunter himself, right? So, earlier in this process, the message from President Biden and from his wife, the First Lady, was effectively, well, this is gonna show up as being wrong, right? You can go back and take a look at that if you're listening. And now what we're seeing is well, we're glad he's taking responsibility for it. So you kind of see some of that messaging change. So you've got that.
Well, the original messaging was the laptop is consistent with Russian misinformation. And of course, everyone knew that, the people who were making those statements at the behest of the Biden campaign, knew that was not the case. So.
Yeah. So, but what do you think? I mean, when I look at this, what I see is a sleazy dude who has a dad who has been in high positions and has probably made a lot of money off the fact that that's what his last name is. Yeah. And that's, that does mean, sleaze stuff. I don't know what that does moving forward for Biden. It damages Biden in the sense that they both have the same last name and his son is involved in stupid stuff. But I don't know what that does for there.
The bigger issue is, who is the big guy and why is he getting 10%?
Oh, in other words, you think you think Joe Biden is part of the scheme and is using his drug?
That's what one of the witnesses has said, and that's what the email said, that Hunter's going to keep 10% for the big guy in these, and the big guy who was the vice president at the time. And I think that is a big problem when you have money that may be coming from parties with whom don't necessarily have our best interests at heart, going to the through this big web of companies, which in itself is is strange. If you're just running a consulting firm, it's not clear why you need all of those entities. But yeah, so I think that's the question, right? It's not Hunter. It's always been about Joe Biden. So, and those are the questions that I think we need to start digging into. And I guess there's a secondary question of did Biden interfere with the investigation?
And that's what Shapley is primarily talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of secondary. In that, I don't know what I'm sort of a unitary executive guy. So I'm not sure that's necessarily, is it obstruction of justice? I'm not sure. Maybe, but I don't. It doesn't jump out at me as that, right? Mm-hmm. Again, it certainly looks sleazy, but I think it's a political remedy, and not a legal criminal law remedy.
So in the larger sense, I think a lot of what happens at the political scene is you now have a lot of the GOP saying, look, Trump's charges aren't that bad because you've got Biden stuff going on. And Biden's basically saying, look, it's my son. He's pleading. This is fundamentally different than what's happening with Trump. And I think you got a big swath of voters who are like, I don't know. I think you all are both like old and done. Yeah. But, you continue to kind of be the standard bearer for your party. What do you think about this in that larger context of what's going on, both in the election and with Trump?
Well, with Trump, again, Trump's kind of his own animal. Biden came into office sort of promising to be the non-Trump, right? So I think, look, everybody knew that what you're getting with Donald Trump, he's sort of been his own worst enemy. But to me, the whole idea of the whataboutism and that the one justifies the other is nonsense. I mean, I think if, in either case, one, you need to be careful in terms of these are presidents and presidential candidates, and it certainly looks unseemly to go around prosecuting them. That said, it's also unseemly to have what appears to be a two-tiered, standard of justice. So I'm.
In other words, you can't prosecute a candidate because he's a candidate.
No, I mean that. Well, you can't prosecute Hillary Clinton because she's Hillary Clinton, and you can't prosecute Joe Biden because he's Joe Biden. I mean, that's what I mean. And then Hunter's deal, which again, I don't know all the facts yet, but if what these other there's other pieces out there seem to just not make sense, right? Again, he's not paying taxes on a lot of foreign income he's getting. Well, where's he getting that income and what's he doing for it? Is he just a cutout for his father? Is his father exercising some sort of polar influence, whether when he was vice president or when he was just a candidate for the presidency, to assist the family fortunes? Those are big problems.
So now to back up, because maybe I don't quite understand, and so I don't want to walk into it without understanding. What's the thing you think that Biden, you were mentioning the two-tiered system, and I took that wrong, and then you said, well, Biden can't be prosecuted, but what's the item you're thinking about?
I don't think
Joe Biden being prosecuted for. I'm a little confused about that one. Yeah.
So no, I think it's prosecutors would be loath to bring a case against. You're no one. I think being the guy who prosecutes Joe Biden or even Hunter Biden is career suicide, right?
Okay. Well, so you think Wes is done and effectively, right? Like, so
yes, yeah. I mean, what these other IRS whistleblowers have said is that they were removed from the investigation and so forth. That's my sense is that, yeah. I mean, who wants Would you want to be the special prosecutor investigating the president's son or the president?
I mean, I wouldn't want to be any of that, to be real honest. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
no, of course, nobody would want to be that, whether it was any president, though. I mean, that's a, that's a difficult position to be
Well, it
in.
also it depends
Party regardless.
on how things are going to turn out, right? I mean, if you are, um, uh, there's no downside really if you're let's put it this way, the FBI, I think it's fair to say, has wanted to get Donald Trump from day one. And I think
That's interesting.
you know,
Why do you think that? That I mean, that's might be further afield.
there was the Michael Flynn interview where the FBI agents set it up and said we're not going to tell them we're coming so that they might request counsel to be there, and they're so disorganized we can get away with doing this and interviewing without his attorney, and we're going to do this under the pretext of what's the act from 1800, Logan Act violation, which no one's ever been prosecuted under. And for what reason? Well, merely to try to bollocks up the incoming presidency. If you look at the text messages, the FBI Lise Page and Strzok. Again, Plan B, setting up potential to try to remove a president. I mean, that's pretty big. You had Kleinsmith, an FBI lawyer, who actually altered an email from the CIA to try to falsely make a statement to the court in order to get a warrant to surveil Carter Page. Those are a couple reasons why I think the FBI is out to get Trump. All of these were extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary actions based on little actual real information. And the more that comes forward, the more that it shows the FBI knew that this wasn't real information. So anyway, that's my sense. Is no, the prosecutor of the Justice Department, Merrick Garland's Justice Department, would be very loath to prosecute Joe Biden.
So in other words, you think from day one, kind of it's the deep the deep state hates Trump.
It doesn't have to be a deep state. I mean, again, this isn't anything that's somehow sneaky or hidden or unknown. I mean, they've made the intelligence community who put out the letter about the laptop being likely misinformation. Again, this is not anything that it doesn't take much to see that these officials take extraordinary steps. Comey and Hillary Clinton to exonerate Democrats and will go to extraordinary lengths to prosecute Republicans.
Now, Democrats would actually look back and say, well, I mean, during the race, they're willing to open up and kind of have the comment about Hillary Clinton being under investigation during the process of it as being a possibility for changing that race in 2016. So I think that'd be one way. If we're gonna have more of the the left here for a second. Say, well, look, if they were all in lockstep, why do that?
I think because they very much thought she would win. They thought it was a lock, and there was no reason not to do it at that point, right? They already
a miscalculation.
Said she's not going to face charges. They took the extraordinary step of having the FBI come out rather than the Justice Department attorney saying we find nothing there, and we're sort of writing in another intentional requirement into the statute that really isn't there. And no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute this mishandling of classified information. But here we are, several years, and this is not to somehow exonerate Trump. Quite the contrary. It's to say that there's one group is treated. There's not equal treatment. So Trump's Mar-a-Lago was raided when he was out there. There was not participation by his attorneys. It was intentionally done that way. Hillary Clinton was allowed to have her lawyer there, and it's, I mean, given advanced, I guess that's. I'm not going to rehash everything that's gone over the last 8 years, but yeah, come on. I guess it's. I mean, let's put it this way: what evidence would support? I mean, what evidence have we seen of FBI officials? I don't know. Never mind. I will move on from that. But
okay.
No, I mean, look, that's what let's even if I'm completely wrong on this, the fact that I'm saying it shows that there is a very much a perception that there are two standards of justice, one for Republicans, one for Democrats. So how about the former Secretary of, this is terrible when I do this on Friday afternoon.
I'm not even sure where your head is, so I don't know how to help. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll come back to that. But go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with your next story. We can. I have my other example. I'll tee up, but.
No. I mean, I think for me, I mean, you kind of said something. I think, Key, there. You're like, look, even kind of the perception of it, is the fundamental problem with it. And as a guy who, I mean, I worked for the Republican Party. No hidden agendas there. I work. I mean, again, I know people don't always like this, but I worked with. You remember a long time ago now, long before we had Rand Paul. Jim Bunning was this junior senator from Kentucky. I worked with Jim Bunning for a long time. Did stuff with the college Republicans and worked in those kinds of circles and orbits, and that's what I did. But kind of that comment there you have, I think in some parts that kind of encapsulates a little bit of my problem with the Donald Trump era Republican Party, which was like the simultaneously the aggressive, but yet, everything is not going the way I wanted to Trump. I mean, I don't attribute that to you, Jay, but again, I get a little prickly about that in the sense that, like, yeah, Donald Trump is more Hunter Biden, right?
No. But
that's
here's for example,
and that's the problem I have with a lot of these takes on the look. What everybody's out to get him. I think, well, no, I think Donald Trump is just it would be like as if Hunter Biden is the guy who's running for office, right? I mean, that's the kind of guy that Trump has been. So going back to, like, I mean, again, I wasn't going to try to get into all of this, but, since we're talking about it, right? So for example, when the National Archives is asking for his stuff, he could have just handed the stuff over, but
absolutely.
He doesn't do that.
He's his own worst enemy.
Tens of thousands.
He brought this all on himself.
Yeah. And then so when you compare it, let's say with the charges for, we have ongoing investigations into Biden. Biden at his residence found two different papers. I think right now, that grand total came up after he let individuals come in to 12. So yeah, I struggle a little bit with that modern Republican Party's view.
Did the police SWAT team show up when he wasn't there and take the materials out of his house?
Well, not all of them, apparently.
So I'm thinking Trump trade rep Peter Navarro.
Okay.
Who is charged with contempt of Congress for failing to appear and testify. Was taken off a plane in leg irons for contempt of Congress for failing to appear and to respond to a congressional subpoena. That is the kind of failing to respond to a congressional subpoena is the type of thing that used to make you a hero on the left. Right. I'm not going to name names, that whole thing. Right. But instead, the FBI pulls him off a plane. Again, this is a senior presidential advisor. I mean, again, have any of the there was currently some documents that the Congress is trying to seek from FBI Director Wray. Do you think he would receive that same treatment?
I mean, to this point, he hasn't had, he hasn't had a contempt of Congress.
There's not a contempt finding. Well, let's put this: there was a contempt finding against Barack Obama's Attorney General for withholding information on the Fast and Furious investigation, he was not taken into custody. That's what I mean by the double standard, right? It's
well. Why don't we?
And look, even if I'm wrong, that perception is out there, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that, but I guess that's again what I was saying is I think that there is a problem with taking perception too far. I mean, I have people who have perceptions. As a matter of fact, I kind of have this guy. Again, I'll keep him his name out of it. He's kind of my phenomenal. Like, what's the most recent kind of conspiracy theory item for me, and he's really helpful for that when I do this show, right? And so the thing, for example, right now going around is that the submarine is linked to Biden and Hillary Clinton because they actually had damaging things on them, and that's why the submarine blew up. That
sounds kind of far-fetched to me.
Yeah, it does, right? Like, but I think sometimes that's what I hear a little bit when I get to some of those with Republicans anymore. Not to say that there's nothing there, but yeah, I mean, yeah. But, maybe let's continue to investigate a little bit, kind of the double standard in a place maybe we're even a little bit closer on this front, which was ProPublica's investigation into Alito, right? Because Jay, I don't know if you had a chance to hear, Ken and I don't know, we always seem to get the good stories. Ken and I ended up getting to do the ProPublica work into Justice Thomas, primarily because you and Mike had actually missed it. Like, you too many things going on, you get to it, so we got to take that one over. For me, I went in pretty skeptical. I thought, look, Justice Thomas, whatever. This is probably just a smear. I actually ended up being really disappointed, right? Like, looked at this pretty carefully. You look at what's going down, and Thomas is not reporting things he's supposed to be reporting. Same guy over and over again, buying his house, buying things, boom. So
I differ on that. I think there was the one instance where there was something he was supposed to report and didn't.
Well, it was more than one. I mean, so his house purchase.
And that said, I've said before, I think that it's certainly a bad look for a Supreme Court justice and Justice Thomas, and I'm sort of almost like kind of personally disappointed, if you will. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, because again, it's repeatedly. It's the same individual. It's repeatedly.
Yeah, but if you're asking me, I mean, again, I think the word I used before was unseemly.
Unseemly.
But does that mean it's an ethics violation, or that Thomas is somehow corrupt?
Well, and again, I think that's something else we had tried to talk about was, what's the difference between corruption versus, violating an ethics. I think in the case of Thomas, the house sale and some of these other sales clearly were issues that needed, even under the old rules, had to be reported, and he didn't report it. So I think he hits that ethics level, but I don't think we have. Where I am not willing to go was there doesn't seem to be any change in what he's doing as a result of that. So, I think in the case of Thomas, you get ethics violations, but you don't have corruption. So this week we get the follow up with Justice Samuel Alito, and so I'll be honest. This time I was probably a little more okay. Now who's violated the ethics rules? But this felt like a whole new step further. So I'm curious to kind of see what you think about this, because at the heart of this, it felt like this was thin as a story at best. You had a lot going on with Justice Thomas, very convincing, and this one kind of felt like the follow up left hand that didn't land. So this isn't a long set of repeated payments. Nobody's paying off a house. Nobody's wiggling on the rules. it all comes down really to one instance. And so for listeners, right, Justice Alito goes on a fishing trip to Alaska in 2008. There's a plane already going. Alito just happens, he's like the last minute goes, okay, I'll take a seat on the plane, whatever. And he actually even asks and has notes about this of asking, hey, do I need to report, taking this plane? And he gets authoritatively told, no, he doesn't have to do that. So that kind of is like, okay, done. It seems like a whole lot of nothing burger. But then the more potentially damaging part is to say, well, take a look at this. Actually, Alito was then, giving favors effectively to the individual who was doing the plane, which is a one Mr. Singer. And the answer is, well,
how so?
Exactly, not really. So you take a look at it, and you take a look at this. You got 7 petitions that ProPublica is citing. In 6 of them, the court rejects everything outright. So we can't even take a look at it because the writ of cert isn't accepted. So by the way, So for listeners, writs of certiorari are the special petitions when you're appealing to the Supreme Court. So you get appealed to the Supreme Court. So we don't get votes on those that we can take a look at, but the Supreme Court turns those down. So boom, done. So we don't know about that. So the only one we can take a look out of this is a case where the court decides on a 7-1 vote, and so whether Alito had recused himself or not accused himself, it would have turned into a 6-1
vote. Been the same result,
same exact outcome. And as Alito has mentioned, he does an op-ed on this, and he's absolutely right. There's no way, if you take a look at the actual filings at the time. There was no way that you could even know that Mr. Singer was involved, right? Like his name doesn't appear. There's no necessary connections. There's no reason he even could have thought to recuse himself. And so kind of what this feels, again, like I said a second ago, it feels a little bit like, okay, we had a lot on Justice Thomas. We had this issue, but now we've got something else. And that something else is really nothing. But we're running with it because it fits the narrative of what had happened with Justice Thomas. But there's really nothing there to it. And in this case, I think ProPublica is making the same mistake that Ken makes when we talk about a lot of this, which is to say, look, there has to be a conspiracy here. And so clearly, if we found it in one case, if there's a conspiracy, that means they all have to be, being corrupt. Even if there is really no evidence.
What was Clarence Thomas and what's his name conspiring to do?
Well, yeah, so the point here being is I don't. Yeah, there isn't. What? Nothing.
Yeah, I will continue to write my hard right solo dissents. What was the other irony was noted. There was that this Singer guy is actually a big champion of gay rights and same-sex marriage. Yet Alito was firmly a scathing dissent, you might even say, in Obergefell. So look, I suppose that the fishing trip didn't help him any there. And I think that just goes to point out that justices don't. The whole ethics piece, right, with the disclosures. Federal court disclosures are geared so that judges know about. They only ask for, is this entity a publicly traded company or a affiliate of a publicly traded company? And the reason for that is because to prevent insider trading. Right. So if a judge knows that he has stock or something like that in a case, and it's going to go really big one way or another for some publicly traded company, that they can't cash in on that. They can't buy up before they award the patent to that company or the other way around. But in this kind of private LLCs where this Singer just happened to be one of many investors, there's absolutely no way for the court to know. Who all the investors in any given company are, and if it's not publicly traded, there's the sense of, well, who cares?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to pause this just for a minute. We're going to take a brief break and come back. And when we come back, what I'm curious to ask you about a little bit is kind of your take on how the court decides how it handles things and what it does. We're going to take a brief break, and we're going to be right back. So, Jay, one of the things that I was mentioning earlier is, Ken has a view that basically says, look, the way that justices make decisions, and it's actually in political science called the attitudinal model, it says, look, it's all based on their ideological background. And so once you understand their ideological background properly, you're going to understand what they're going to do. And so conservatives are going to behave in kind of these consistently conservative, in his view, obviously bad ways.
Right.
So, but that model doesn't really hold up. As a matter of fact, we've abandoned that model as social scientists a while back. And we actually had an argument about this a couple of weeks ago. And so he actually continued to make the case for that attitudinal model. So what I'm curious is, again, since we don't get to do the show as often, would be to say, okay, so for you, you're a lawyer. This is what you're doing. What is your schema for understanding how the court is going to be making decisions? Because when I take a look at it, even though I'm not a lawyer, of course, I'm a political scientist, I don't necessarily see ideology being the only. Of course, it's maybe one of the variables that we're going to be using, but it's certainly not the univariable. It's not the only thing. It's not the total explainer for how individuals are predicting their behavior. And it doesn't seem when I listen to you on the show that you're using a schema like that. So what's your model for understanding how individuals are going to be making these decisions? Then maybe the not, well, it's just all ideology.
Right. No, I think every justice obviously comes in with some ideological predispositions. And that's to be expected, and I think to some extent hoped for, even, right? I mean, that's you have these confirmation hearings and you get a sense of what you're getting. But ideological predispositions are different than political policy goals, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big distinction. And I think Ken seems to view this, and let's put it this way, I'll throw it out there. I think a lot of Democrats view the Supreme Court as a policy-making body, right? That this is a organization. Well, we'd like it to enact, for lack of a better word, policies that we want to see, whereas conservatives are more comfortable. And in fact, make the argument that look, there's a lot of stuff that's just not our job.
It's non-judiciable. It's not what you want to decide.
Wanted a stamp that said "stupid but constitutional." And I think you see that with a lot of these splits that there can be different ways of looking at things, and you can say this is a terribly, and Scalia would do this. These may be a terribly stupid policy, but it's not our call to make. Likewise, in speaking of going back to Obergefell, Scalia made the argument there that look, it's it may be that there's same-sex marriage is really very much the right way to go and the proper moral thing to do and smart policy and something everyone will like. But that's not the court's job to decide that. That should be, in his view, a legislative decision. So I think there's that difference right there, right? That if you sort of go in with the expectation of your guys are there to right wrongs, as it were, right, rather than simply bring into effect what the legislature has enacted, you're going to take a different view of how, or you will interpret judges' behaviors differently.
Yeah, which even goes so far as to say, when I take a look at different justices, I see justices who prioritize understandings of the law different, understandings of how we understand precedent, for example. To the extent that we need to think about precedent in hard ways, in the ways that I see the Chief Justice doing, or as being more willing to say, look, we got to blow up precedent if we see it as being fundamentally flawed, which I see more often in cases like Justice Thomas, who's like, look, it doesn't matter how many times you rule that way.
Thomas is much more saying, look, that all right, this case, that was decided, whatever, 100 years ago, it was wrong then and it's wrong now. And we shouldn't, there's no reason
Yeah.
we should continue to indulge this error.
Which is very different than the Chief Justice who says, well, look, we can't radically change all of this, Thomas. We've been doing this for 100 years. So we start from that 100-year precedent.
Yeah. But that said, I mean, Thomas, that approach is not necessarily wrong, right?
No, I mean, again, it's just a way of saying it's not all ideological. You have two conservatives.
If that approach carried the day, we wouldn't have had Brown versus the board. We would have had more Plessy versus Ferguson.
Right. So I mean, to kind of get at that a little bit more, we have this story. It just happened on Friday, so we don't have a lot of time to get into all of it. But once again, we have a case where we see conservatives and liberals mixing in ways that you wouldn't anticipate if you were taking that attitudinal or that ideological model, right? So the Supreme Court hands President Biden a narrow win in a major immigration case, 8-1, right? And so in the majority, we have two of the conservatives, we have all the liberals. In a concurrence, we have the remaining liberals besides Alito, and Alito ends up being your one out. Kavanaugh writing the majority opinion. And in this case, of course, we're talking about executive power, and you might say, well, executive powers are different. But that's, I think, part of the problem, right, is once you start recognizing the different categories of law might be, quote unquote, different, what you're saying is that as you're posing it, that policy outcomes are fundamentally different than ideological differences, and ideologies can overlap depending on policies.
Right. So for example, you could say my ideology is I interpret the Constitution, I read it as providing for a strong executive and strong executive federal preemption of other state actions. That can turn either way, policy wise, depending on who's in office.
Yeah.
And like in this case, essentially it said the executive, we're looking at the court sort of approving a view of enhanced executive power. The people line up kind of as you think they might.
And as a result, you don't get, you don't have the constant, what you might think of as being conservative liberal split.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, what we might want to do then is why don't we move forward and take a look, move out. We've done a lot of stuff in the court. We talked about the presidency a little bit. Let's chat a little bit about, I think it touches a little bit on what we were talking about, but the attempt by Representative Lauren Boebert from Colorado to impeach President Biden this week for his, in her thought, mishandling of the Mexican border. Now, that was eventually put on the back burner after a lot of negotiation on Thursday by Speaker McCarthy. The vote has been pushed to a committee, but she has vowed that she is only going to let this go on if it isn't just a delay tactic. And if she views it as a delay tactic, she has vowed that she will bring her resolution up, quote, every day for the rest of my time here in Congress, end quote. Now, in addition to that, I think being difficult for Republicans in a variety of different ways, it also shows some of the tension, I think, that we see in the Freedom Caucus as Green and Boebert really got into it on Wednesday. I won't get into who was actually saying what, we don't know specifically, but some nasty words were definitely exchanged. Both, agree about this. And what's interesting about it is what the argument effectively here is about is well, who gets to be the pusher of impeachment for Biden? And so, this brings up something else that a couple of weeks ago that I had brought up with Ken, which was me musing a little bit about the future of the Republican Party, and then eventually, as I'd mentioned earlier, step back in the Trump era. That's not anybody who's listened to the show knows about this. And so, I don't know. For me, it seems like, okay, we got Biden. He's got some of the worst poll numbers you could have. He's not blowing this job out of the water. I mean, look at his exit from Afghanistan, stuff that we've talked about on the show. And yet Republicans just can't seem to get over what they saw as the Trump era slights. And they're like, well, our guy got impeached, so now we're going to, file impeachment charges. And there's really no there to these impeachment charges. There's nothing. There's just nothing to take up. And I can't help but see this as being kind of the spiral of some of the Republican Party and McCarthy just kind of hanging on with his fingernails. What do you think?
It's strategically idiotic.
Yeah, fair.
The fact of it is that Republicans never win impeachments. That's just one of these rules, right?
Nobody's ever won an impeachment ever.
Oh yeah, they have.
No, there's never been a successful presidential impeachment.
No. I mean politically.
Oh, you mean like in other words they won votes out of it or
impeachment. Republicans certainly lost a Clinton impeachment. Neither were actually convicted. But
in the case of Nixon, he resigns before it can even move forward.
Right.
Clinton being one of the first to kind of really fight it.
There was a sweeping Democratic wave, though, than the next election.
I see what you're talking. Okay, continue.
Whereas it was sort of a backlash the other way with Clinton. So no, I think that's just one of those iron laws. Republicans don't win impeachments. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. And we could do a whole show on that. But so Lauren Boebert stopped talking about it. The worst thing you could do is to impeach him and therefore make him a victim and sympathetic and all that. Instead, go and beat him up on border policy.
That's
the appropriate play there. But I think there are people in Congress who sort of just lack I don't know whether it's the strategic vision or just maturity, that they want to engage in these kind of crazy extreme tactics because whatever, it's fun, it gets them on TV. I don't know.
Well, I was going to ask you, and I think that's an honest and worthwhile question to explore for a minute, which is just to say, go back to the Clinton impeachment for a minute, right? There's obvious reason there to potentially move. You can make the argument, okay, look, even if we're going to lose this is worth moving forward, or this is doing. I think you say the same thing about the Trump impeachment, but here there's no there other than if you thought you were going to win some political points, and as you're pointing out, there's no political points to win on this. So you're not going to win it. There's no there. So there's no like moral reason to say, well, I'm going to go down with this ship because this is what we need to do. And again, this is, I don't know. When you take a look at the last election, you take a look at how much closer it was than I think many predicted. I think it was these kinds of moves that probably, it doesn't explain all of it, but it's going to explain some of the problem that Republicans had last go round. Yeah.
Again, it's the plan. The way to deal with this is to come up with your own border plan and say this is why ours is better than what's going on right now. So let's change. Let's change our approach.
So I guess here's my last question. Again, because we're doing the kind of the conservative view, so let's just go with that because that's who we are. But do you think, and this might be an area where we have, some difference between us. I guess for me, I sit around and kind of hope and agitate for a Republican Party that is matured, moved beyond the Green, the Boebert, and the Trump era. And these moments make me depressed because I feel like, I lost, right? I don't think that's happening.
Oh, no, my good Lord. I've been sort of having something of an existential crisis for some time now.
So what's your view on that? Let's make it the conservative.
I really do. I feel, much of what I fought for most of my career has sort of gone up in flames, right? So, no, I certainly get that. I was a Jack Kemp Republican. and I may well be the last Jack Kemp Republican. So,
I'm younger than you, so I might still be. I'm just teasing. I'm probably not as much Republican as you are anymore, though.
Trey, as you know, Mike and I talk a lot. We grew up as kind of Reagan Republicans, and we're very much believers, at least particularly I was, in like the hope, growth, and opportunity wing of the Republican Party. And again, one of high points of when I was in my 20s, I got to meet Jack Kemp and had a lunch with him and all that. And and for people who don't know who Jack Kemp is, he was Ronald Reagan's secretary. Well, he was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Ronald Reagan's HUD secretary, ran for president, vice president. But he was a big believer in that. Look, the problems that we have in our urban areas, our cities, the way to fix them is with more capitalism, not less. Remove the government barriers to opportunity, and you'll see these areas and the people in them naturally flourish. And that's he was not someone who was out to own the libs, so to speak. One of his lines was, he's also big about reaching across racial lines. Was that look, I've showered with more black men than most Republicans have shaken hands with, and so he is. But anyway, I don't see. Tim Scott is probably the closest thing to sort of a Jack Kemp Republican, I think. Marco Rubio, maybe a little bit. But yeah, I sort of feel like we're a dying breed. And the other piece, of course, that kind of went with that was, fiscal restraint.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
That has long gone out the window. So here I am.
I would say fiscal restraint and the idea that trade will benefit us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's another big part of it is, free trade. And also, Kemp and Ray were proponents of increased immigration, but legal immigration. Again, I think that's, I had the privilege, again, in my young life to attend a speech by UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick, who made the point that immigrants, and especially immigrants who are coming from, at that point, a lot of the former Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, that they serve the vital purpose of refreshing our appreciations of our freedoms, right? That so much that we take for granted, the opportunities we take for granted, that when we see them through new eyes of people who are just arriving here, it should inspire us to kind of redouble our efforts to make sure that those freedoms and those opportunities continue. So, but anyway, that's just me.
Well, since you put it there, and I don't disagree. Why don't we finish up the show chatting a little bit? There's not a ton to be chatted here, but we don't have a lot of time left. Which was, I kind of feel, maybe the antithesis a little bit, of that view of conservatism, which is that there was a Chinese immigrant ban this past week that's getting ready to go into effect, and so we've had a lawsuit filed out against it. What happens is beginning on July 1st, there's a new law in Florida that would bar citizens of China and a select few other countries to a lesser extent from owning homes and land in the state. And again, this week, a lawsuit from the ACLU and others was filed against it. So now, to be clear, what the law is doing is it bans individuals who are not citizens or green card holders from owning buildings or land in Florida. Now, that is just a blanket ban for those from China. For citizens of Cuba, Venezuela, Syria, India, Russia, and North Korea, it limits them from owning property within 10 miles of what is deemed to be critical, quote unquote, infrastructure. Now, when Governor DeSantis signed the bill into law, he argued that it's going to help protect Americans and Floridians from the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. The ACLU, on the other hand, is arguing that it violates the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Now, kind of a weird historic fact, not everybody might know this, but Florida was actually the only state that had these laws left over. So in the early 1900s, a lot of states had a variety of ownership bans for both Japanese individuals and Chinese individuals. Now, most states struck those down or they got repealed in court. There was a lot of things that happened there. Florida's actually remained on the books until 2018 when there was finally a ballot measure that ended it. And this law effectively would be bringing it back in this new form. I mean, I don't know. Again, DeSantis is not somebody I'm a big fan of. Again, having listened to you, I don't think you're a big fan of DeSantis either in a lot of ways. What do you think about this? I mean, this kind of almost smacks the opposite direction of kind of what you were waxing about there. So I'm curious about your take, Jay.
So first of all, I looked up the bill, and it is really much less extreme than what the folks from the ACLU described in Time magazine. I don't read this as barring home ownership. There's and I'm going through right here. There's again talks about a foreign principle, and that is again someone who I think, as we'll go back to the definition section here.
I believe if you take a look at definition section, effectively it's a person who does not have permanent status from China.
Well, actually, foreign principle looks like isn't defined. At least not.
I'd have to pull it up myself.
At least I haven't gotten it to it yet. So look, to the extent that this bill would say if you're a Chinese national, you can't own a home or you can't purchase land. Plainly, it would be straight off the bat unconstitutional. I don't think there's any question about that. These other things, though, when you're talking about buying land within so many yards of a military installation, so many yards of other things,
and that's not the part that's being challenged.
By things of like, the Chinese Communist Party, not within 5 miles of any military installation, or controlling certain, assets. I think that probably fits the bill. I'm not sure what the rationale would be to prohibit, just straight out home ownership. And again, I'm not entirely sure that that's what this bill does. But again, I'll say I'm not an expert on it, having just kind of perused through it.
I don't know. It feels like this. So. It feels like what DeSantis does with this and others, kind of like his busing of immigrants from not Florida but other states into other states, is he's really trying to make larger position taking and mold himself as being the Trump without the issues, right? I mean, I'm going to take all the positions of a Trump, but better, and I'm not going to have the same kinds of, moral, legal, and other kinds of issues that Trump did. And it seems like that kind of fits into that. I mean, it's the same with, say, his ongoing feud with Disney, rightfully or wrongfully. It doesn't really matter a whole lot other than he's trying to take position takes.
Well, hang on just 1 second, because I did just find the section I was looking for.
Oh, beautiful.
What this bans is, first of all, the People's Republic of China, Chinese Communist Party, or any official member from acquiring any real property. It prohibits a partnership, association, or corporation organized in China with its principal place of business in the People's Republic of China from doing the same. And this is the place that they're arguing: any person who is domiciled in the People's Republic of China and who is not a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States.
Exactly. Yeah.
Again, I think lawful permanent resident. I suppose that's the biggest part, right? Could that would
almost undoubtedly be like a green card, I guess.
But well, let's put it this way: if someone's here legally, I think on a renewable green card, again, I'm not sure what permanent means in that context. But setting that aside, I think there's something to being vigilant about property that is being purchased or owned by the Chinese, meaning the Chinese government, right? Not Chinese people. But and I, for national security reasons, for a whole lot of reasons. There was you're too young to remember this. There was sort of the panic in the 1980s that it was the Japanese that were buying up all of our real estate. There's sort of there's a subtle nod to it in Die Hard. It's Nakatomi Plaza.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, if you remember, there was I think at one time they owned Rockefeller Center, 30 Rock, and there were all these like iconic American buildings and downtown real estate that was being purchased by the Japanese, and there was this big concern of, look, we don't even own our own country, and it's all owned by the Japanese, who, again, weirdly, as we look back on it, in the 80s, were viewed as a tremendous threat, particularly not military, but economically.
People today don't recognize
it reminded
that.
me sort of that, right? Although I do see China as more the military threat, certainly than what the Japanese were. So anyway, we could talk about that more. To me, this is one of those things that a lot of times, I was going to make this point to Mike when we were talking about the Pride stuff a couple weeks ago. The problem so often is that conservatives just aren't that good at playing this game. And when they do things, it is sort of ham-handed, and sort of sets themselves up for getting beat over the head. And we don't have a Reagan who sort of could do these sort of things and pull it off with a smile and engage in what were culture wars and win them, right? Not by demonizing one side or another, but by appealing to sort of what were common American feelings and interests and instincts. So,
we don't. But conservatives don't appeal to values anymore. That's not what they do, right? I mean, I know we'll need to end here, but I had a student recently. And I teach one of the classes I adore teaching at OC is ideologies, and I think I've said this story on the show before. But I had this young Republican Hispanic, and was just an adamant Republican in so many ways. And I kept trying to gently push. Not that I was trying to change what he was.
A young Mike Baranowski.
Yeah, I mean, no, he was he was not moderate. There is nothing moderate about this individual. But trying to
there was nothing moderate about the young Mike Baranowski.
Oh, there you go. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
But I kept trying to say, well, look, you can be for that, but just recognize that's not conservatism, right? Like what you're advocating for here, this isn't conservatism. And so we finally got around to reading Edmund Burke and Kirk and other conservatives, and he finally came to my office one day, and he's like, man, I hate these guys. You were right. I was like, I know I'm right. You're not. Again, I'm not telling you what to be, but I'm telling you that's just not what you are. Right? You're not a conservative.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem is because conservatives have kind of these traditional value connections, and that's just not what the modern Republican Party does. But anyway, Jay, we should probably pause here. It's been wonderful doing this show with you.
Yeah. Good times. Yeah. I'll be joining you for the midweek show.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, what we're going to be doing on the midweek show is we're going to kind of co-opt Ken a little bit. I don't know. We'll take over. We're going to do it. I don't know. It feels right that those who care about the Constitution will get to do a piece of it. Although I don't know. Maybe we'll disagree since I'm not a unitary executive. I'm a presidential scholar, so we can get over on that.
Right.
That's one where you and Ken actually weirdly agree. But so anyway, what I say all this to say is so
Ken and Clarence Thomas of all people.
Yeah. If you want to be a part of that, that means you need to be a supporter of the politics guys. So as we end the show, I really hope you'll consider becoming one so that you can join Jay and myself for that. Constitution conversation. Again, we're all the way into Article 2. We're going to be doing that. And it's what supporters, it's what makes this podcast keep going on, right? Without the supporters, it's not going to happen. But you also get all kind of goodies when you become a supporter of the Politics Guys. Like, so for example, the show you're listening to right now, I know in the middle, you know, we've got ads right there, right? And that's terrible. I hate advertisements, you know, but you become a supporter, you know, for a lot less than what you're paying for your streaming services, a lot less. And you're going to get the ad-free version, right? There's no pay and have ads at the Politics Guys, right? You know, we're not Netflix. So we would love for you to get that. We would love for you to get the full supporter exclusive midweek show. Again, Jay and I, we're going to be going over Article 2 of the Constitution. We come back. That's going to be a lot of fun. And we would love for you to be a part of those things. We're going to kind of we get to break away from the news cycle. So how can you become part of that? Well, you can head to patreon.com/politicsguys. So if you'd like to support the show, head to patreon.com/politicsguys. It'll show you the different support levels that are possible and all the different options that you have and what you'll get by being that part or that level of supporter, right? So for example, you might want to become part of our active Discord group, right? As a matter of fact, I get on there just to get beat up most recently, but I love doing it. Every now and then Jay will slide in and say a few things, I should do more. And it's just difficult with a life-work balance type thing and it's not because I don't want to do it. It's because I do want to do it. If you follow me, you want to do it.
What I mean? That I would spend too much time and that sort of thing on it if I started to engage, because I want to engage intelligently and thoughtfully. And sometimes that takes time.
It does take time, but I mean that's one of the things I love about that group is that we do get to get in things a little bit more complex ways, right? It feels a little bit more like what you're doing when you're having a conversation, rather than what I really hate. I really loathe doing things on Twitter because you just can't have a conversation there. It's just all little and there's nothing to that. So that's why we have that there. So again, if you head to patreon.com/politicsguys, you can see those different levels of support. You can see what you can get. Now, there's other ways you can support us, of course. You can support us on Venmo, where we're at Politics Guys. You can also support the show through PayPal. If you want to take a look at all of those links, they are all in the show notes. So head on there now, scroll down on your phone. You're going to see them there. Or if you want to go the old-fashioned way, you can always head to politicsguys.com/support. Now, if you'd like to get that midweek show where Jay and I are going to take on the Constitution, continue here for me and Ken for a week, but you're not in a position to financially do that. I get that. Again, I say this regularly. I've got 3 kiddos. We have 1 income. I know what that's like. It's not easy. We can make that happen. You just need to shoot an email to the guys. Specifically shoot that out to mike@politicsguys.com and we'll get you all set up. Now, whether you're a supporter or not, we really would appreciate that if you would subscribe, rate, review in whatever podcast app you use. I hope it's Apple Music because they're the best. But, even for you Spotify users, I'm just teasing. Please, whatever way you're doing, we would love for you to rate, to share, to send those on, to put your comments with that when you support that. That's the way these things move forward. If you've got a question, a comment, correction, gripe, manifesto, or just anything else, you can always reach us at mail@politicsguys.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and you'll find all the links for all of this in the show notes below. Just scroll down a little bit. I want to thank the executive producers of the Politics Guys, who are Bruce Johnson, Wilma Marino, Andra Masker, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, and Ivan English. We'll be back with a new episode here in the midweek, and then again at the end of next week. I hope you'll join us then.